Hey everybody, this is Jonathan with the Short Term Shop, and I'm going to walk you through how to identify a great STR in the Gulf Shores area. When looking for a short-term rental in the Gulf Shores area, the first thing I always look at is the location. So when I'm talking about location, I'm not necessarily talking about Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, or Fort Morgan, which there's another video going over the map as well to kind of walk through those areas with you. What I'm really talking about is the distance to the beach access. That is very important when you're running your numbers. You can't really compare, let's say, a 4-bedroom that's what we call a first tier house. That means it's direct Gulf front, you're directly on the sand of the beach, to one that is even one street behind that one. There will be difference in performance and difference in numbers. And when people ask me about the 75th percentile, 50th percentile, a lot of that does come down to management. But if you have a first tier house on the sand, you could be with good management, you could be in the 99th percentile for a a 4-bedroom, I should say, but that also depends on other factors as well. But anyway, location is one of the most important things when identifying a property here. Okay, so after you look at the location and the beach access, there definitely are other important factors into how a property will perform here. Uh, the amount of bedrooms, the higher the amount of bedrooms, the more gross you'll generally do. In addition to that, how updated the property is, how nice the architecture of the property. For instance, if you do have one of those very nice first bedroom houses that are direct Gulf front, if one has sweeping views of the Gulf and windows that have great views, that's much more marketable. So there are factors that go into play with that as well. And the decor is important also. You don't want one that's decorated in dark, to not look too beachy or bright. And that can be changed. Not so much the architecture, but as far as the decor and furnishings, that's why it's not as important to me as location. But the architecture can play in as well, especially when you're looking at views. Speaking of views, that is a very important thing to consider. Now, it's not a must-have for houses especially. For condos, I would say it's a little more important due to the high amount of condos here. So you will be wanting to set yourself apart when it comes to condos. So to have a first-tier condo with views, you will definitely increase your ADR and your occupancy. For houses, it is nice and marketable to have views, but I have a lot of clients who are doing very well with houses without any type of view or partial views. So I would say it's even more important for condos, but it is a huge plus to have some views for houses as well. Okay, so I get asked this question quite a bit, and it makes sense because the two properties you're going to be looking here will either be houses or condos, and in my opinion, they can both be great cash flowing investments, but there are things to consider with both of them, and I'll go over those in the next slides. Okay, there are some things to consider with condos, and first of all, let's talk about the pros of a condo. There are some great aspects of condos. So one thing is if you're trying to get in at a lower entry points, there's not going to be a lot of houses available, but there will be condos at many different price points. And also, not only will there be some available, but you can get some in a superior location for a lower price, meaning I know I've talked about first tier a lot, but those first tier houses, the markets keep shifting, so I don't want to say any prices in case they change by the time you reach out to me, but suffice it to say, the first tier houses could be twice as much as, let's say, a 3-bedroom first tier house, meaning on the sand, is probably going to be around twice the price of a 3-bedroom first tier condo. Now, and that condo can have views and everything. So, will it perform? Will the first tier condo perform as well as a house? More than likely not, but due to the price point, it could still yield similar or better returns. So that is a big plus, a big pro of a condo. Another thing is they do have a lot of amenities. So even if a house may have a private pool, I mean, that's great, and it will rent like crazy if a house has a private pool. It will not likely have anywhere close to the same amenities. Now, it depends on the condo complexes. Some of them just have a pool, and a pool is basically a requirement of a condo, in my opinion, if you're in this market. If it doesn't have a pool, I would not invest in a condo that does not have a pool, in my opinion. But a lot of times, I'll also have additional amenities like indoor heated pools, which help with or hot tubs or saunas, which help with the snowbirds that come down during the off season, and gyms and all these other things that houses don't have. So that's a nice thing is you get those amenities as well. Another thing is you do have lower capex and maintenance. So your HOA fee will include a lot of things in it, and that's why I don't really consider it a negative thing, the HOA fee. It depends, it's very variable, but a lot of times it will cover your maintenance of your common areas and your also your master insurance policy for the HOA and the and some a lot of times all your utilities, including cable and internet, except for electricity. But those are very variable. Um, but those are just some of the pros of a condo. Now let's talk about some of the potential issues with condos. So we just went over some of the pros, but now let's talk about what you have to look out for. So first thing right off the bat is the financing can be a little tricky with condos. So with condos in particular, I do highly recommend to go with a local lender who knows how to lend on condos. Even the best out-of-state lender you can have trouble with. So for your own sake, I would highly recommend to go with a local lender, and I do have a few recommendations when we talk on our call that I'll be happy to give you, or you can email me and I'll provide those. That's the first thing, because they can either be warrantable or non-warrantable. Those are just Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines on whether to lend on the condo or not, or whether to buy it on the secondary market, I should say. But even if they are warrantable, meaning you should be able to use conventional financing, um, many out-of-state lenders do have trouble. So just let me know, and I'll send you some good local lenders. Another thing with condos is you do have to try more to set yourself apart than with houses, because there's so many available that if you don't have one with a view, in a good location, what I mean is, in a good location in the complex, you will be competing against all the rest of them in the complex and the ones with superior views. So you do have more competition for renting with condos than you do with houses due to the scarcity of houses here. The big thing with condos is, to me, that you really have to look out for are assessments. Now, assessments, what are they? They are just payments that condo owners have to make for certain things, such as maintenance or improvements. For instance, if the roof needs to be replaced, if they're talking about installing a new elevator, if they need to update all the windows on the complex. These things have a cost associated with them, obviously, and they have to get that from somewhere. So normally what they'll do is issue an assessment to all condo owners to pay. Now the assessments are based on the size of the unit as well. So a big penthouse, a 4-bedroom penthouse suite condo is going to be assessed much more than in that same complex than a studio condo that's much smaller square footage. So it does scale based on the size of the unit in the complex. There are other assessments as well. There could be a recurring insurance assessment, and we can find that out pretty quickly. And then there's also damage-related assessments, which, for instance, from Hurricane Sally, I've closed on some condos that had $35,000 assessments. Now, these are pretty rare to have some that big, I'll say, but when you do get hit with those, that could really mess up your your returns for that year at least. So there are ways to mitigate that I'll talk to you about in more detail when we talk. but there are those to be aware of. So, and there's also ways that we can do a lot of due diligence to figure out whether there's any upcoming assessments. And when we start working together, if you find a condo that you like, we'll I've got your back, and we'll go through all the due diligence that we need to do on condos. Okay, so we just covered the pros and cons of condos. Now let's look at the pros and cons of houses in the Gulf Shores market. So let's start out with the cons. So first of all, they're very scarce here. There's not as many houses to choose from as condos, and they're in very high demand. So that leads to a lot more competition for houses, and you do have to usually put in very competitive offers very quickly to get a house under contract, which we can be very successful at doing. Um, but anyway, there's much more competition for houses and much higher price points. So if you're trying to enter the market with a lower price point, you may have some issues with getting into a house. Um, Another thing is that the capital expenditures and maintenance costs are going to be more than a condo. And the reason is with a condo, really all you have is your appliances, your HVAC, your water heater. And with houses, you have all that plus roof. You have to keep up with the exterior paint, which can be pretty expensive. If you have decks, any kind of wood or metal, that doesn't really last too well in the environment, the salty air environment, which there are many ways to help preventative maintenance to save you a lot of money that we'll go over when we're under contract with a house. But anyway, that they're still going to be more expensive than a condo. Another con or potential issue is that the insurance costs can be greatly higher for a house than a condo. Um, and I'll go over that in more detail, but just know that they're much more variable with houses and usually much more expensive. Then another thing, well, those are really all the cons of a house that I can think of, but there are some great pros to a house. So first of all, they generally gross more if they're in this similar location. So if you have a second tier house or a first tier house and you're comparing it to a condo right beside it, they generally will gross more. There's absolutely no property in this market that I've seen better numbers on than a first tier house. Now that being said, they're also by far the most expensive properties in this market. So that's just something to keep in mind. There also are, when you're going to rent your house, one of the reasons they grow so much is if you're looking for a house to rent, you don't have as many to choose from, so you're likelier to get a higher ADR for your house. And then you don't have to worry about special assessments, and you don't have to worry about anything to do with financing on a house. A conventional loan will be able to buy a house here. So those are all some of the reasons why they're so popular and why people are really looking for houses in this market. So let's talk about insurance in the Gulf Shores market. So the reason I'm dedicating an entire slide to this is that insurance is something that you're probably not accustomed to seeing rates this high if you're not accustomed to coastal insurance rates. So for houses, they're much more variable than condos, but let's talk about houses first. So they could range anywhere in the current time of this recording. They could be anywhere from under $4,000 to $20,000 for the same exact house based on the location and if it's gold fortified. So the same size house, I should say. So okay, so first of all, let's talk about the location. So if it's in a Cobra zone, and that's just CBRS, and I would look on the FEMA flood maps. You could type in the address. There's a map service center that you go to FEMA flood maps, the website, and you can just type in the address. It'll take you right there. And if it says CBRS with little diagonal lines running through it, that means that it's in a Cobra zone. Those Cobra zones can be pretty high for insurance, but that being said, I've closed a lot of really nice deals in Cobra zones, and people are still doing very well. You just have to factor in whether the higher insurance is worth it for that particular property. And that is also one of the things we do early on in the due diligence period is get insurance quotes. But anyway, so that's the first thing you look for is for houses. Condos, doesn't matter about the flood zone. But for houses, you look at the flood zone. Then you want to look at the age of the house. If it's an older house and they haven't replaced the roof or the HVAC and the windows are original, probably going to be higher insurance. If it's a newer house, it's going to be lower, whether it's gold fortified or not. But if it is gold fortified, that means it's built to the highest standard in this market currently for hurricane proofing, and that has to do with the windows, the screw pattern on the roof. There's a lot of things that go into gold fortified standard, and that will save you significantly on insurance. So for those under 4,000 per year annually quotes, those are going to be gold fortified houses, and that's built after 2017 or newer, and that is if it's older than that, it's not going to be gold fortified. And if even an older house that has a fortified roof installed and new windows, that can help out drastically, but it never can be retroactively made into a gold fortified house. But you can put fortified aspects onto a house and make it and lower the insurance as well. Condos are a lot different. The range is going to be much lower, 1,200 to 3,000, maybe a little more. And it also, if they don't have a recurring HOA, you have to get an HO6 policy in addition to the master HOA policy, which is usually covered by the HOA, but sometimes it's in the form of a recurring assessment, insurance assessment. But on that HO6 policy, that's where you add things like loss assessment coverage, like the assessments we talked about to help mitigate some of those and other things. But on that HO6 policy, that's what's going to be around 1,200 to around 3,000 or so. When you're factoring in other expenses besides insurance, they're going to be pretty similar for utilities, at least, to any other market. Depending on the age of the house or condo, especially a house, the size, that's going to affect how energy efficient it is. Cable and internet, if it's a condo, you have to see if it's covered by the HOA. If not, it's going to be $100, $150 per month. Then you have water, sewer, trash. All that is going to be pretty comparable to any other market, to be honest with you. Now, maintenance, that is going to vary based on, as we discussed earlier, on if it's a condo or a house. If it's a house, you do have to make sure that you keep up with the paint on the exterior of the house and the decking. If there's any type of wood rot, you want to try to prevent it from getting worse, and you have to make sure to paint any boards that are exposed and the exterior. So that's something to factor in as well. And then for taxes, for property taxes, there's a formula that I included on this slide, and that's how you get an idea of what those will be. The assessed value is from a tax appraisal, so that could be different than the market value, but I use the market value just to give me a conservative estimate on that. Another thing about this market, or most likely any beach market, is going to be seasonality. So the peak season is for rentals is really going to be starting in spring break around March, and it's going to go all the way through the peak summer months up until August. And during August, when mid-August kids start going back to school, you normally see a transition where there's a pullback in tourism, and then a lot of my clients actually said that they did pretty well in September. That's normally a transitionary month, but still warm and beautiful here usually. And then October, and then when you have a fall break, which I believe it falls in late September or October, early October, you do have some good weeks there. And then as you get into November, it starts to slow down. It's still warm and nice usually. And then you do have Thanksgiving, and December you have Christmas, and January and February are pretty slow. There's not really that. It's when it actually gets cold, and it doesn't really, you don't do too well during those months. But what you can do to offset those slow months is what you get, what you call snowbirds. So snowbirds are couples usually couples that come down to stay during the winter months, and they're usually coming from places with harsher winters, and They normally stay in smaller properties, so you may see smaller properties with higher occupancy. That definitely does not mean they're going to have better overall gross than a larger property, but they could have higher occupancy. But you can even get snowbirds to stay in large houses too. That's the part of the strategy that may take you a couple of seasons to really nail down and to figure out what's best for you to help offset some of your expenses during those months. Another thing is hurricane season happens to coincide with when you exit out of the busy season, which is very nice. So in August is typically when hurricane season starts, and then the major hurricanes, September historically. So it just so happens that that's after the peak busy months. There still are some pretty decent months though. So hopefully no hurricanes come anytime soon. But the good part is that you definitely should have your summer months where you make the vast majority of your cash flow out of the way by then. Now I hope you're ready to find a great beach property here in Gulf Shores, and I'm here to help you find it. Just to kind of summarize what we talked about, if you can find a property that's walkable to the beach, that is going to be the most assured way to get some pretty nice gross revenue. That being said, there's some properties on the bay side and some drivable properties that do perform well also. Um, so I wouldn't necessarily discount those completely. Then, just find something, if there's a way, if there's views or something like that that can set yourself apart, that will definitely help as well. But you don't have to. You can just keep going. As long as you find one that's walkable to the beach or in a decent location, you're going to do well if the price isn't too high, and that's what you've got me for, to keep up with the market, and I'll help you with all that. Now, with an agent like myself and the short-term shop agency, you'll have a lot of guidance. This is just an overview to help you get started and to help identify properties. But when we're doing due diligence, and we're going to tear these places apart and help you make sure that it is a good investment, as far as making sure there's no red flags or anything that would prevent it from being one. Now, as far as running your numbers, I will help guide you if you need it on how to do that. But of course, I can't run the numbers for you, but I'm happy to guide you on where to do that. Luke Carl's enemy method is a great way to find out how to run the comps and to look at, if you look that up on YouTube, Luke Carl's enemy method. You do have the AirDNA data as well for this market, but I highly recommend the enemy method over anything else when analyzing properties. And I look forward to really helping you find something here, and look forward to talking to you and introducing ourselves.